Good morning, Woodford Wildcats. I'm here today with Chapter 10 from Charlotte's Web. What a great day to snuggle up by the fire and listen to a book. Day after day, the spider waited, headed down for an idea to come to her. Hour by hour, she sat motionless, deep in thought. Having promised Wilbur that she would save his life, she was determined to keep her promise. Charlotte was naturally patient. She knew from experience that if she waited long enough, a fly would come to her web. And she felt sure that if she thought long enough about Wilbur's problem, an idea would come to her. Finally, one morning in the middle of July, the idea came to her. Wow, how perfectly simple, she said to herself. The way to save Wilbur's life is to play a trick on Zuckerman. If I can fool a bug, she thought, I can surely fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs. Wilbur walked into his yard just at that moment. What are you thinking about, Charlotte? He asked. I was just thinking, the spider said, that people are very gullible. What does gullible mean? Do you know what gullible means? Think for a second what gullible might mean. It's easy to fool, said Charlotte. That's a mercy, replied Wilbur, and he laid down in the shade of his fence and went fast to sleep. The spider, however, stayed wide awake, gazing affectionately at him and making plans for his future. Summer was half gone. She knew she didn't have much time. That morning, just as Wilbur fell asleep, Avery wandered into Zuckerman's front yard, followed by Fern. Avery carried a live frog in his hand. Fern had a crown of daisies in her hair. The children ran for the kitchen. Just in time for a piece of blueberry pie, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Look at my frog, said Avery, placing the frog on the drain board and holding out his hand for a piece of pie. Take that thing out of here, said Mrs. Zuckerman. He's hot, said Fern. He's almost dead, that frog. He is not, said Avery. He lets me scratch him between the eyes. The frog jumped and landed in Miss Zuckerman's dishpan full of soapy water. You're getting your pie on you, said Fern. Can I look for eggs in the hen house, Aunt Edith? Run outdoors, both of you, and don't bother the hens. It's getting all over everything, shouted Fern. His pie is all over the front of him. Come on, Frog, said Avery as he scooped him up. Frog kicked and splashed in the soapy water onto the blueberry pie. Another crisis, groaned Fern. Let's swing in the swing, said Avery. The children ran to the barn. Mr. Zuckerman had the best swing in the county. It was a single piece of heavy rope tied to a beam over the north doorway. At the bottom of the rope was a far fatter knot that you could sit on. It was arranged that you could swing without being pushed. You could climb a ladder to the hayloft. Then, holding the rope, you could stand on the edge, look down, and you were scared and dizzy. Then you straddled the knot so that it acted as a seat. When you got up your nerve, you took a deep breath and jumped. For a second, you seemed to be falling to the barn floor. Then suddenly the rope would begin to catch you, and you would sail through the barn door going a mile a minute, with your hair whistling in your eyes and ears with the wind whistling in your eyes and ears and hair. Then you would zoom up towards the sky and look up at the clouds, and the rope would twist, and you would twist and turn with the rope. Then you would drop down, down, down out of the sky and come sailing back into the barn, almost into the hayloft. Then sail out again, although not as quite as far this time. Then in again, not quite as high. And out again, and in again, and out again, and in again. Then you jump off and fall down and let somebody else try it. Mothers for miles around worried about Zuckerman's swing. They feared their children would fall off, but no child ever did. Children will almost always hang on to things tighter than their parents think they will. Avery put the frog in his pocket and climbed to the hayloft. The last time I swung in this swing, I almost crashed into a barn swallow, he yelled. Take the frog out, ordered Fern. What do you think might happen if he forgets to take that frog out, as it's in the pocket of his overalls, which is right here? Avery straddled the rope and jumped. He sailed out through the door, frog and all, and into the sky, frog and all. Then he sailed back into the barn. Your tongue is purple, screamed Fern. So is yours, cried Avery, sailing out again with the frog. I have hay inside my dress. It itches, called Fern. Stretch it, yelled Avery. It's my turn, said Fern. Jump off. Fern's got an itch, Avery sang. When he jumped, he threw the swing off to his sister. She shut her eyes tight and jumped. She felt the dizzy drop and the supporting lift of the swing. Then she opened her eyes and she was looking up into the blue sky and was about to fly back through the door. They took turns for an hour. When the children grew tired of swinging, they went down towards the pasture and picked wild raspberries and ate them. Their tongues turned from purple to red. Fern bit into a raspberry that had a bad-tasting bug inside of it and got discouraged. Avery found an empty candy box and put his frog into it. The frog seemed tired after the morning in the swing. The children walked slowly up to the barn. They too were tired and could hardly have enough energy to walk. Let's build a tree house, suggested Avery. I want to live in a tree with my frog. I'm going to visit Wilbur, Fern announced. They climbed the fence into the lane and walked lazily towards the pig pen. Wilbur heard them coming and got up. Avery noticed the spider web, and coming closer, he saw Charlotte. So there they are, swinging from the loft. Hey, look at that big spider, he said. It's tremendous. Leave it alone, commanded Fern. You've got a frog. Isn't that enough? That's a fine spider, and I'm going to capture it, said Avery as he took the cover off the candy box, and he picked up a stick. I'm going to knock that old spider into this box, he said. Wilbur's heart almost stopped when he saw what was going on. That might be the end of Charlotte if the boy succeeded in catching her. You stop it, Avery, cried Fern. Avery put one leg over the fence into the pig pen. He was just about to raise his stick and hit Charlotte when he lost his balance. He swayed and toppled and landed on the edge of Wilbur's trough. Do you remember what's under Wilbur's trough? The trough tipped up and then came down with a slap. The goose egg was right underneath. There was a dull explosion as the egg broke, and then a horrible smell. Fern screamed and Avery jumped to his feet. The air was filled with terrible gases and smells from the rotten egg. Templeton, who had been resting in his home, scuttled away into the barn. Good night, screamed Avery. Good night. What stinks? Let's get out of here, Fern was crying. She held her nose and ran towards the house. Avery ran after her, holding his nose. Charlotte felt greatly relieved to see them go. It had been a narrow escape. Later on that morning, the animals came up from the pasture, the sheep, the lamb, the gander, the goose, and 7 goslings. There were many complaints about the awful smell, and Wilbur had to tell the story over and over again and how Avery tried to capture Charlotte. Now the broken egg drove him away just in time. It was that rotten goose egg that saved Charlotte's life, said Wilbur. The goose was proud of her share in the adventure. So there's Avery as he falls and squishes the egg and creates that rotten smell. I'm delighted that egg never hatched, she gabbled. Templeton, of course, was miserable over the loss of his beloved egg. He couldn't resist boasting. It pays to save things, he said in a surly voice. A rat never knows when something is going to come in handy. I never throw anything away. Well, said one of the lambs, this whole business is all well and good for Charlotte, but what about the rest of us? This smell is unbearable. Who wants to live in a barn that is perfumed with a rotten egg? Don't worry, you'll get used to it, said Templeton, as he sat up, pulled wisely along his long whiskers, and crept away to pay a visit to the dump. When Lurvy showed up for the lunchtime, carrying a pail of food for Wilbur, he stopped short a few paces from the pig pen. He sniffed the air and made a face. What the thunder? He said, setting down the pail, as he picked up the stick that Avery had dropped and pried the trough up. Rats, he said. Phew, I might have known a rat would make his nest on the trough. How I hate rats. and Larvae dragged Wilbur's trough across the yard and kicked some dirt into the rat's nest, bearing the broken egg and all Templeton's other possessions. Then he picked up the pail. Wilbur stood in the trough, drooling and hungry. Larvae poured. The slop ran creamily down around the pig's eyes and ears. Wilbur grunted. He gulped and sucked and gulped, making swooshing and swishing noises anxiously to get everything at once. It was a delicious meal. Skim milk, wheat middlings, leftover pancakes, half a donut, the rind of a summer squash, 2 pieces of stale toast, a third of a ginger snap, a fish tail, 1 orange peel, several noodles from noodle soup, the scum off a cup of cocoa, an ancient jelly roll, a strip of paper from the lining of a garbage pail, and a spoonful of raspberry jello. Wilbur ate heartily. He planned to leave half a noodle and a few drops of milk for Templeton. Then he remembered that the rat had been useful in saving Charlotte's life and that Charlotte was trying to save his, so he left him a whole noodle instead of a half. Now that the broken egg was buried, the air cleaned and the barn smelled good again. That afternoon passed and evening came. Shadows lengthened and the cool and kind breath of evening entered through the doors and windows. Astride her web, Charlotte sat moodily eating a horsefly and thinking about the future. After a while, she bestirred herself. She descended to the center of the web, and there she began to cut some of her lines. She worked slowly and steadily while the other creatures drowsed. None of the others, not even the goose, noticed that she was at work. Deep in his soft bed, Wilbur snoozed. Over in their favorite corner, the gosling whistled a night song. Charlotte tore quite a section out of her web, leaving an open space in the middle. Then she started weaving something to take place of the threads she had removed. When Templeton got back from the dump around midnight, the spider was still hard at work. Hope you guys enjoyed today's story.